Solomon at the chair of the Genesee Valley chapter. Good to see a pretty good crowd here tonight. Do we have any first-time attendees? Okay, great. Welcome. Just a couple of business things. Tom, you're pointing at me. No, okay. I thought I was in trouble. Not yet. A couple of business things. We got exit signs scattered around the room. Just make note of those. Also, please make sure your cell phones are off, okay? So we don't interrupt our presenter tonight. Also, for anybody that might need hearing assistance, we do have an induction loop up here. It's outlined by these white strips of tape on the floor. So if you've got what's called a T-coil, you'll be able to catch the sound. If not, we have headphones that you can use that are tied in. Okay. And if at any time during the presentation of our presenter you can't hear, we have two microphones. One for the auditorium sound system, and the other is for folks within the induction loop. If you can't hear, please raise your hand. Okay, and let the presenter know.
She goes out and checks the park once a week.
We do have some folks making some announcements. Jack?
Yep. Evening. How many of you have a pair of snowshoes? Good. Because the Monroe County Winterfest, Saturday, January 27th, we need some snowshoes to display to people and let them try on, let them walk around a bit, hopefully, if there is snow. So that's one of the things that we need. We need the snowshoes. You can drop those off at 10:45, between 10:45 and 11, at Evergreen Shelter, which is in which park is it? Mendon Pond Park. That's right. The second thing we need volunteers to help others other visitors who come in and want to try on the snowshoes, especially children. We need a volunteer about an hour. It runs from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. What'd you say, Cindy? Saturday, the 27th of January. What's that, 3.5 weeks from now? I'll pass around the sign-up sheet. Be kind enough to sign up. Thanks.
Annie, you're up.
Hi, I'm Annie Fogarty. I'm one of the folks that's helping to organize the YM Younger Members High Peaks Winter Weekend. Obviously looking at me, I am not that. But if you're interested, we're actually closing out our signups. So if you're interested, and it's going to be President's Day weekend up in Lake Placid. We rent part of the hostel up there, T-Max and Topos, and we make our own food and break off into different groups that go hiking or cross-country skiing or do some ice skating and go into Lake Placid, do some shopping. So if there's interest, please see me at the end of the meeting so that I can just get your particulars, because we're closing out that sign up, and if you want to go, I'll make sure that you have a chance to sign up. All right, thanks.
Okay, we had a very nice workshop presentation by George from the folks at the River Watch, and now it's time for our Outdoor Voices presentation. Oh, Jackson, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. You know, I did this intentionally, Jackson, so you could interrupt me. Okay.
His first time and he screwed up. It's all right, Reinhardt. I know. Sooner or later it has to happen to every chair. That's what happens. Hi, everybody. Hi. Well, you guys sound great. Listen, before I talk quickly about the bookstore, a couple of items. The presenter from our workshop tonight on the Genesee River Watch was kind enough to place 2 of these handouts, and they're over there on the table to the right of my bookstore table. So please stop over there at the end of the program and take 1 or both of these home. Gene Binder here, who is one of our really eager champions dealing with invasive species, has also put on the other end of that same table 2 handouts about the hemlock woolly adelgid. And this guy is still around, still wreaking havoc, and our eastern hemlock and the Carolina hemlocks that are up and down the entire eastern seaboard of this country. And you really need to help. If you're out on the trail, you need to know what to look for, how to deal with it, and most importantly, how to report it. So there's also information about this little website that you can use. You can download this on your phone and file a report right from the trail if you have cellular service at that point. So please stop over there at the end of tonight's program. Right back. You know, the merchandise from the bookstore relatively is unchanged from month to month and year to year. So, you know, if you've looked at something in the past and it caught your eye and you thought, well, I either wasn't sure I wanted to buy that, or I didn't have enough money, or you know that dumb old Jackson, he doesn't take credit cards, cash only, or checks. Well, don't forget, the stuff is over there month after month. And I still have, for those of you who weren't here in December at that program to buy your ADK calendar, you can still do it. So $11 takes one of these little bad boys home with you, and I hope to see you after the program tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Now it's time for our Outside Voices presentation. And Katie Cusick, our program chair, could not be here tonight, but Jim Miller is going to introduce our presenter.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to welcome Gary Diana as our speaker tonight. Gary is a member of our chapter, one of our own, and also an experienced mountaineer. He's an instructor in the winter mountaineering class, has climbed a number of different mountains, including Concagua, I'm going to say that wrong again, she's been trying to teach me the right way to say it, which is the tallest mountain in the Western Hemisphere. But today he's going to tell us about his most recent adventure on going to Mount Everest Base Camp. Gary.
Thank you, Jim. Let's see. Namaste. That's probably the only word I know in Nepali. But that's what you say to people when you're passing on the trail or you're leaving someplace. I don't know why this is taking so long to load. I'm a former software engineer, and I have a love-hate relationship with computers. Let's try this one more time. There it is. Cool. All right. So I can tell you a quick story. This trip almost didn't happen. And the reason it almost didn't happen is because I traveled to Mexico and the Pacific Northwest and South America, and my wife has always been really supportive of all these things, even to the point where in 2021, I signed up on a guided trip to climb Mount Elbrus in Russia, because I wanted to see Russia, and two of my buddies from the Argentina trip were going to go. So I signed up for that. My wife was like, yeah, go see Russia. And that all got canceled because of travel restrictions to Russia, and then COVID never went away, and all that. So I've always watched Mount Everest videos or stuff on YouTube, movies, whatever. And then I started watching YouTube videos on base camp, to trek to base camp. And my wife always had this rule which was, I'm fine with you going anywhere, as long as it doesn't have the word Everest in it. And it took a little bit of convincing her, and finally she said, you know, you should just go do this. So that's when I started looking for a guide, and I snuck a little, so I'll show you the trek to Everest Base Camp, and then I took a little side trip on the way back to climb to the summit of Island Peak, which I didn't let my wife see those videos until I got back. The ones on YouTube, because they scared me initially. So there's Nepal, and you can see it's bordered to the south by India, to the north by China. Mount Everest sits right on the border. If you go to the summit of Mount Everest, if you take, you know, 2 steps one way or the other, you're either in Nepal or China. And people do climb it from the north side. The Chinese really restrict that, especially the last couple of years. But anyway, so my flight was to Kathmandu. I went from Rochester to JFK to Doha, Qatar, and then Doha, Qatar to Kathmandu, about 20-ish hours of flight time. So once I was in Kathmandu, I spent a day there with my trekking guide, just visiting various things around Kathmandu. And then the next day, we took a small plane and a 30-minute flight to Lukla, which is where the base camp trek starts. So there I am with my guide Pradeep greeting me, and that's my hotel room in Kathmandu. When I researched this trip, I looked at using the usual guide service I use, Rainier Mountaineering. And I just did some digging around it. I found out that a lot of people had this thought of hiring a Nepali guide because they know the country better than anybody, and also the concept of keeping the money in Nepal. You know, Nepal is a developing country. They're trying to build their tourism up, and it is increasing every year. So that was kind of a goal of mine. So one of my Aconcagua buddies had hired Pradeep a year previous to go on a trek in Nepal, and he had all this good stuff to say about it. Because if you Google, you know, Nepali guides, there's hundreds of them, and you know, how do you know what you're getting when you don't know these people, and you know, eventually you're going to wire them several $1,000s. So this all worked out well. I went back and forth with Pradeep. We came up with an itinerary that met the goals I wanted, and he was available at the time to do a one-on-one. So when we started on this trek, it was Pradeep, myself, and a porter named Nima, another Nepali. So the first day in Nepal, we visited the biggest stupa in Kathmandu, which was kind of cool. The country of Nepal is about 80% Hindu and 20% Buddhist, and the trek goes through the Khumbu region, which is predominantly Buddhist. It's predominantly Sherpa people. That's an ethnic group, and so a lot of the religious sites and things that we saw as we trekked had more probably to do with Buddhism than Hinduism. That's another look at that stupa. You can look up, I won't go through the architecture, but there's a whole lot to this structure. The base, the dome, the eyes, which signify wisdom, the various steps to nirvana are represented here. It's just a really interesting spot. So for the first 2 days I was there, I ate traditional Nepali food, and dal bhat is one of those things. There's fermented vegetables, rice, yogurt, fruit, curry, and lentil soup. And I ate that for 2 dinners. And I felt fine until I think the 3rd day. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this is basically the trip, right? Down here at the bottom, fly from Kathmandu to Lukla, and then we start traveling from tea house to tea house and staying overnight. So Pakding was the first one. Then we went to Namche Bazaar, which is probably the biggest village on the whole trip. Tengbuche, Pengbuche, Dingbuche, Lobuche, Gorakshep, and then Everest Base Camp. And then just real quick, we'll see more about this. So when I was done with Everest Base Camp, we went back to Gorakshep, climbed up to the top of Kalpatar. I got some good pictures of that. And then went down to Lobuche, down to Shukan, traveled over to Island Peak Base Camp, and then went to the top of Island Peak, and then retraced our steps over the course of 2 or 3 days, all the way back to Lukla. So this will give you an idea of the elevation. So Kathmandu about 4,300 feet, Lukla about 9,000. And then you can see it progressively, you go higher and higher and higher until you're at Everest Base Camp, which is 17,000, almost 600 feet. What this graph doesn't show is there's a lot of up and down between these ever-increasing bars. You know, you get to a high spot, you think, oh boy, we're just going to go up from here, and then you travel down the valley, down to the river, cross on a bridge, and have to go all the way back up and gain even more altitude. So that's that. And along the way, we have 2 days in Namche Bazaar for acclimatization. We'll have 2 days in Dingbuche for the same reason. You know, I've always been lucky. I've been able to deal with high altitude. I don't get acute mountain sickness. I'm lucky that way. A lot of people, we saw a lot of people get sick and have to turn around. Some were helicoptered out, some were walked out on a horse. But it was a struggle. It's a struggle to breathe because this is pretty high altitude. But I don't know if it's my Polish or my Italian blood, but those 2 countries have produced some pretty good mountaineers. So this is the airport that we're going to land at here. And you can just see the planes just off the edge of the runway. And I'll play this video, it's about to land. This is dubbed the world's most dangerous airport. This is a short airstrip. So yeah, you see it's a pretty small plane. It holds, I think, 20 people. Two columns, I guess 2 rows maybe. So you get off the plane, and this is your first view of Lukla. You know, the mountains in the background, and a couple of tea houses we passed right away. This is the start of the trek. Just outside of Lukla, you walk to this gated area. Now this Pasan Lamu, she's the first Nepali woman to ever summit Everest. I think she did it in the 90s. She was 32 years old, and she died on the descent. I wasn't able to figure out what the cause was, but I don't think it was a climbing accident. I think she just died. So kind of a sad note, but that's, we'll get to this more later, that's usually how people die on Everest. It's on the descent, not so much on the ascent. This is the first of 5 suspension bridges we crossed, some higher than others. It's a little different, and yeah, animals come across this thing too. Horses, mules, yaks. You kind of got to watch out, depending on how many animals are going to be coming by. So those 2 days at Dalbat affected my stomach in probably not a good way. So I had to go on a simple food diet. So I started having for breakfast porridge with chopped up apple. this is what you see when you're on the trek. You know, this is just a typical yak that's got a couple of duffel bags tied to him, him or her. So yaks, a little bit about yaks. Males are called yaks. Females are called naks, with an N, naks. Even though everybody just kind of generically refers to them as yaks. This is the first tea house we spent overnight in just outside Lukla. So really nice. Prayer flags, you know, Tibetan prayer flags are a very big thing, in especially this region in Nepal, but all over Nepal. These things, they're called mani stones, and they have prayer mantras chiseled into them. And sometimes, like this one, they're painted. A typical room, you know, 2 beds. This room didn't look like it had a table in it at all, but pretty basic. None of the tea houses I stayed in had heated rooms, so I had my minus 20 sleeping bag, partly because I knew I was going to Island Peak, but just a nice warm sleeping bag. Some rooms had an attached bathroom, some rooms don't. They have a shared bathroom. Sometimes I have a private bathroom, and here I had one. This one even had a shower, which is pretty nice. And running water. I didn't have to fill a bucket or a pan to flush the toilet. A typical dining room in a tea house. You see in the middle here, there's a wood stove. They'd have that going in the evening. And then so what typically would happen is we'd arrive at a tea house at the end of the day, like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. My guide would sit me down and hand me a menu and say, what is it that you'd like to order? I'd tell him, he'd go to the counter, order the food, come back with tea, and sit, and we'd chat or play cards or anything while the food was cooking. And then he'd serve me the food. And it's just how they do it there. You know, I asked him a lot of questions about that cultural part. That's just how they do it. You're a visitor here, and you're treated like a visitor. Typical supper, this happened to be fried potatoes with a little bit of egg and vegetable, chicken soup, and of course tea. Lemon ginger, I believe. There was one hospital we passed. So on the right here, you see there's 2 suspension bridges. This newer one, I don't know when it was built, but after this lower one. This is the one they call the Hillary Bridge. It's really high up. When you look down into the river, it's just really up there. So another kind of funny custom, it took me like 3 dinners to figure this out. Like, my guide would serve me my dinner, and we'd sit there and chat, he'd drink his tea, and I'm like, why don't you get your food? He goes, no, I'll eat later. I'll eat later. He kept saying this. And so on the 3rd night, he explained to me, he said, well, in Nepal, visitors eat first. Nepalis eat when all the visitors have been served. And I said, so if somebody comes in the tea house at 8 o'clock and you're hungry, he goes, they'll be served first. So this is, I just took a picture of the Nepali guys that happened to be in our tea house, and they got to eat after all of us were fed. So here we're in Namche Bazaar, and it was a nice clear day, so I started taking some pictures. It's just, these mountains are so big, it's just hard to imagine. These pictures really don't do justice to how big they are, and they're just like right there. So, acclimatization days. So we got to Namche Bazaar, we stayed overnight. The next day we had an acclimatization day, which I thought, well, we'll just sit and relax. We'll walk around the market area and just kind of take in the sights. Well, acclimatization day means we're going to climb higher than where we are now, but we're going to come back. So we went, this is another place on the track that people go to, the Everest View Hotel. So this is the back side of it. And this is looking out the front. And so you can see way in the distance there. It looks small, but there's all 29,000 feet of Mount Everest. Another view from the hotel. So then we returned back down to Namche Bazaar, and we went to another part of the park that's up high as you're walking out of Namche Bazaar. And here they have a statue of Tenzing Norgay. He is one of the first 2 men to summit, along with Edmund Hillary, to summit Mount Everest. And there's a statue of memorial here in his honor. So coming down from that area, you get a nice view of Namche Bazaar and how the hotels and stores and things like that are all arranged. You can basically buy anything you want in Namche Bazaar. All the mountaineering boots you see guys wearing, Everest, clothing, all that stuff, it's for sale here. Another shot there with the mountains in the back. Okay, vegetation. So rhododendrons are really common. They grow wild here, and they look a lot like what we have here. The other interesting thing I noticed was the trees are very similar. They have cedar trees that look like our cedar trees. The bark is the same, the leaves are the same. And they also have a pine tree that's everywhere that looks a lot like our white pines. The needles look very similar. This is an interesting place in Namche Bazaar. So prayer wheels are a big thing. And normally they set up a prayer wheel, and you always walk to the left of a religious monument or a prayer wheel. And if you walk around one of these things, you always walk clockwise. And the same goes for the movement of the prayer wheel. It's always clockwise. So this is a pretty entertaining. So these prayer wheels are powered by water. It just happens to be a natural slope here. So you can see the water moves through there, and that's what makes those prayer wheels stick. So now we're going to leave Namche Bazaar, and typically our typical day was wake up at 7:30, breakfast at 8 o'clock, and 15, 20 minutes later, we're on the trail. And then around 10:30 or 11, we stop for a tea break. And this just happens to be where we stopped that day for our tea break. And you can sit here and have a nice cup of tea, and this is your view. So there's always a lot of yaks, and you know yaks are coming when you hear this. The yaks wear a much bigger bell. That's just a little souvenir bell. And the idea is when you see yaks coming, you just back up towards the non-cliff side of the trail and just let them do their thing. So these yaks are carrying propane cylinders, and they're coming from Everest Base Camp. So I'm guessing that these propane tanks are empty. They're just bringing empties back. Yeah, just another shot of the village. You see there's a stupa here in this village. Nepalis seem to like these blue roofs. Like you do see some other colors here, but predominantly that's the color they like. All right, so from there we went to Tengbuche, and so this is the monastery at Tengbuche. I believe it's the largest monastery in this region. So you can see this is the gateway to the monastery, and the monastery is actually in the back here, this beige building with brown windows. And just some of the close-up of the ornate structures they have on that little gateway thing there. So there is the monastery. We went in one morning because from like 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, the monks chant for an hour. And we were allowed in there, and we sat quietly to the side, but they don't allow pictures. So I couldn't take any pictures or video, and it was just a really, just a beautiful setting. very ornate inside. And you know, you see these monks that are, you know, dedicated to Buddhism. Now this picture I grabbed off the internet. This is what it looks like on the inside. And you can see the monks' robes are here. They sit on these benches. And what you're seeing here is about half the room. But there's just so much ornateness, and there's old prayer books here. It would have been really nice to take a video of the whole thing, but you know, not allowed. Another typical supper: fried noodles, some veggies, and some yak cheese, which is very tasty. Just another picture of this village with stupa and the mountains in the back. Oh, we're still in Tengbuche, that's right, that's what this is. You're only going to see about a quarter of the pictures I took, maybe a quarter of them. It wasn't hard to take a good picture in the spot. This is kind of cool. So above Tengbuche, they use these parabolic dishes to focus the sun on the bottom of a teapot to boil water. Because you know, a lot of these villages don't have electricity. Some of them have small hydro plants that they put in to generate electricity. Some of them have solar. But a lot of cooking is done with propane, and you know, this is a cheaper way to boil water than burning propane. Just some more kind of cool scenery. This, I believe, is Dingbuche. And here we get another acclimatization day, which means we're going to walk around here, get something to eat, and then we're going to walk up to a viewpoint. Really high one. Here again, another, you know, noodles with yak cheese. At one point, my guide told me I wasn't eating enough, so we started ordering me apple pie with every supper. You see, he's a little guy. Altitude affects everybody differently, but for me, it decreases my appetite. I'm just not as hungry, even though, you know, you're exercising, your body's working really hard. Yeah, this is one of my favorite pictures of the two stupas with the mountains in the back. So here, I think Dingbuche is off to the left here where my cursor is. And you can see the top of one of the stupas. Well, maybe there's two of them. There's one there and there's one there. Now we're walking up this big hill to a viewpoint for climatization. More of what you can see from up there. Yeah, so there's Dingbuche down below, and I believe we're just about to the top of this viewpoint. So the idea is, you know, your body, well, it's not really getting terribly used to the elevation of Dingbuche, but you push your body by going up higher, it has to work harder, and then you come back down. And so that kind of cycling action actually stimulates your body to produce more red blood cells. Yeah, and these mountains look like you can touch them. They're so close and they're so big. There's Pradeep and I, a couple of happy trekkers. I'm not sure. This might be Lobuche, not positive. Here's a stone hut that a yak herder would stay in, and kind of you see, you know, you notice there's a lack of trees here because we're high enough in altitude that there are no trees. So what they do have a lot of is rocks. So you see the buildings are made of rocks, the fences are made of rocks, the roof is made of rocks. Yeah, a lot of detail in those mountains. This was a tea stop we made, and you know, this, you're sitting drinking tea, and this is what you get to look at, this mountain. All right, so now we're at this place called the Lukla Pass, and it's a high spot through the mountains. So at this particular spot at Lukla, there are memorials to all the climbers that have died on Everest and the surrounding mountains. So I found a couple, I walked around and looked at a lot of the stones that were here and things. This one on the left is a monument to Rob Hall, who's the, more or less famous New Zealand guide who died with a client in 1996 during that Everest tragedy. Where Scott Fisher died, Rob Hall died, and a number of clients. This other one was pretty interesting, David Sharp, and I'll read you the inscription on his stone here. It says, "It is better to live one day as a tiger than 1,000 years as a sheep." The other kind of outstanding, noteworthy thing was when I read these stones looking around, most of these people died in the descent. It said right in the stone, died on the descent at Camp 3 or died, at Camp 2. This is why people don't let people go to places with the word Everest in it, I guess. Amadabo, that's another famous mountain. If you could, when we were trekking, probably any time before 3 p.m., you'd get these clear skies. And then after 3, the clouds would start to roll in. That was just a typical weather pattern. Now I believe we're coming down from that viewpoint. No, that's not it either. Not sure what village this is. So here's the start of the Khumbu Glacier, the one that comes down off of, there's the Khumbu ice fall, and then it flows into this river of ice. You first start to see it here. You can kind of see underneath the stone. There's a couple little, I don't know if you call them ponds, they're pretty small. So now we're in Gorakhshap. We're at the last village before Everest Base Camp. So on the way back from base camp, we're going to climb this Mount Kalapatar, a little over 18,500 feet. And you look at this, it's basically, I think the name basically translates to pile of black rocks or something like that. But you can see Mount Rainier in the background, which is a whole mile taller. It makes Kalapatar seem small, tiny, really. So this place is really out there. And in fact, they say that in the wintertime, it's not even inhabited. So they rely a lot on solar, as you can see here. So here we get our first look at Everest Base Camp. If you look closely, all those little like dots down in there, that's part of Base Camp. It actually curls around and goes off to the right here by the Khumbu Glacier. But we're going to walk down about where the pointer is. And there's the rock that marks the southernmost point of Everest Base Camp. It's kind of the rock where everybody gets their picture taken. So we went and did Everest Base Camp, took some pictures there, walked back to Gorakhshap, and we had dinner. And my guide said, "All right, here's the thing. We're going to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. At 3:30, we'll have a couple of Cliff Bars or something, and then we're going to walk up Kalapatar for 2 reasons. One is for acclimatization, because you knew I was going to Island Peak, which is about 1,500 feet or so taller than Kalapatar. And he said, we're going to watch the sun rise behind Everest. So up here, this is Everest. This is the south summit of Everest. And this is Nupse, another, I believe, 8,000 meter peak. So that, I really was questioning whether it was worth it going up here, because I was already tired. It was the middle of the night, but it was definitely well worth it. And once the sun came up, I started taking some more pictures. Just like I like the lines in the snow there. So once we got back from Kalapatar, we went back down to Gorakhshap and walked out to Dingboshe. At that point, my trekking guide handed me off to my climbing guide. He was a real licensed Sherpa guide, also named Nima, like my porter. So here's our dining tent at Island Peak Base Camp. So underneath these tablecloths and cushions are just rocks. They just piled up rocks and made benches and made a table. This was our supper for that day when we got there. Yak cheese sandwich, some noodles. We had some popcorn, of all things, and pizza and tea. So that was around 5 o'clock. By 6 o'clock, we were heading to our tents. So, because I was a lone traveler, just myself and the guide and the porter, this is my quarters. I had a pretty spacious tent. It was all set inside. All I needed to do was roll out my sleeping bag. At one point I heard some noise. I stuck my head out the door of the tent, and this is what I saw: a bunch of yaks walking by. And they're not very aggressive animals. Like, I never saw one go after a person, and I wasn't gonna try to get a selfie or pet the furry cows. I didn't need a medical emergency where I was staying. So the way this worked was, we went to bed at 6 o'clock, and they woke us up at midnight. At 12:30, we went to the dining tent and had breakfast, which was either porridge or hard-boiled eggs. And by 1 o'clock, we had our packs on, and we started up down the trail to Island Peak. So the first 1,500 feet, there was no snow or ice. You're climbing up this steep, rocky mountain through a series of switchbacks. And just when you thought, we got to be near the top, you would look up and you'd see headlamps way above you, and you'd be like, we're not there. So it was almost demoralizing to look it up, because you realized how much further you had to go. And again, this is a high altitude climb, and it's hard to breathe. So once daylight started to break, we got to a place where we encountered the glacier that comes off of Island Peak. So there's a lot more snow and ice. And we stopped at a place called Crampon Point, and we put on our crampons, our climbing harnesses, I'm trying to think of what else, ice axe and all that sort of mountaineering gear to get ready for what was coming. Yeah, you can see some hikers up this way. I don't know that that's Island Peak right there. It could be. It sort of looks like it, but I'm not sure. This is like a glacial lake that you can see, and what you can't see is base camp is just forward of that, but you can't see it because of these mountains are in the way. So you can see here the glacier. There's a crevasse. There's a ladder right there over a narrow spot. And so we did have 2 or 3 ladders to cross over. And so what happens is you got these 2 ropes you can kind of hang on to, but you still got to be kind of careful, because even though you're on a safety line and everything, you can still fall down in there, and that's not a good thing. This middle picture shows the first roped up rope area. So when you get to this spot at Island Peak, there's fixed ropes, and you probably can't see it, but you have an ascender. And if you've ever seen like a Everest video or something, this clips onto the rope, and as you slide it up the rope and pull, it catches on the rope. So you can pull it, you can take 2 steps, run it up again, take 2 steps, and that's a Jumar or an ascender. And you can see here, so I've got one line tied to the Jumar and to the safety line, and then I've got another tether from my harness to the same fixed rope, so that if I let go with the Jumar or something happens, I still have another way to arrest my fall. Oops. Yeah, this is not a, well, we can watch it for a second. And the reason I'm moving slow here is partly because I'm probably just about 19,300 feet or so, and it's hard to breathe. You feel like you just don't have any energy. So once you come up that hill that we were just looking at, you go across a plateau, which you can see here in the background, and then you hit the wall. And the wall is about 900 feet high, and there's fixed ropes. Maybe every 75 feet, there's a rope anchored at both ends that you can hook your Jumar up to, hook your safety line up to, and you just take your time and work your way up the mountain. But you can kind of see here, you know, this guy here in the background is just starting out. He's almost at the wall, ready to start. Oops. Ready to start. Oops. What's going on? I got it. All right, yeah. So you can get an idea here about the steepness. This is, I think this is a view from the summit. So what we did basically was we climbed this 900 feet in this snowy area all the way up to this knife edge. And then once we got there, we climbed the knife edge all the way to the top. That's a little bit better picture. You can kind of get the idea. We come up the wall here. Oops, geez, I'm doing it again. And then there's a fixed rope that goes all the way up till you get to the summit. Now the summit, it's about the size of a queen bed. The mountains in the Himalayas are very pointy. They're not like our mountains, which have been, had the tops eroded off of them by probably glaciers. These mountains are still growing, and so there's just not a lot of room. So once you get to the top, you're at the end of this fixed rope, and there's an anchor point at the very summit, and you clip into that because any side you fall off of, you're going to fall about 900 or 950 feet, and it's smooth. There's nothing, there's no trees, rocks, anything to stop you. You're just going to slide down, which would be bad. So there I am at the summit. So we started out at 1 in the morning. We got to the summit at 10 a.m. So it took 9 hours to get there. We spent about a half hour up there taking pictures and things like that. And then we came back down the mountain. It took about 4.5 hours to get back to base camp. I rested for about an hour in my tent, and the guide woke me up. We packed up our stuff. And then we did a 3-hour walk back to the previous village for an overnight. And it was a long day, waking up, basically moving from 1 a.m. until I think we got to our tea house around 7:30 or 8 p.m. It was tiring. I mean, on the walk back, I was like, I'm too old for this, I can't do this anymore. And then a few days later, I was fine. Oh, and the guy told me when we got back to the tea house, he goes, you're a new record for me. And I said, what do you mean a new record? He goes, you're the oldest person I ever got to the top of this mountain. I said, well, thank you. Oh, when I got back down too, there was a funny, I met 5 Russians and 4 Australians and had dinner with them. And when I got back, one of the Russians, he was packing up and he goes, hey, do you remember passing me during the Rocky section? And I said, yeah, I think so. I wasn't sure because you're just so focused on what you're doing, a lot of things you don't remember. And he said, yeah, you passed us on the Rocky part. And he goes, do you mind? How old are you anyway? And I tried to get him to guess, but he was too polite. He said, no, I can't guess. And then I told him 65, he's all shaking my hand and everything, and I thought, wow, as slow as I am. I wonder what he would have said if Reinhardt was up there. So I was a 2-month grandfather, right here. I think it's my right, I don't even think it's a privilege, but I think it's my right to start making mountains and mountaineering and hiking available to my granddaughter. So it'll take her a few more years to figure out what this is all about. So here we are, we're coming down, we're descending Island Peak, and now we're hitting this plateau area. It's not perfectly flat, but it's mostly flat. So that was Island Peak. So now we're walking back the way we came down the base camp trekking route. We're headed back to Lukla. So I took pictures of interesting things. These are yak pies. And the reason they're there is because, whoops, there. There's not a lot of trees up here at this altitude, so people have to burn something to keep warm, and this is what they burn. Porters carry all kinds of crazy stuff. I saw porters carrying 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. These porters, there's 3 of them here on the right, they're carrying 12-foot long, 5 or 6 inch squared steel tubing. Yeah. I mean, really only the young porters I saw carrying loads like this. I mean, you know, this would kill an old person, even a Nepali. So here's some Nepali mountain goats right on the trail. I'm standing right there. This is not zoomed. They were just there grazing. Here's a yak grazing. This was another interesting monastery in Panguche. Again, it was very cool on the inside, but there was no pictures, so all I can show you is what was on the outside. We got a tour from one of the monks. This is a Nepali dog. This is what they do during the day. They lay around, they're docile, never saw an aggressive dog. At night, they chase each other all over the village and bark. And this is what they do during the day. They just lay right in the road, right in the trail, you know. Just funny. So here we're leaving the park. You can see the army polices the park. You know, you'll see them walking around and doing their thing. But they're the police force of the park. And there's my climbing guide, Nima, my porter, Nima, and we're at the gateway to the EBC trek. We're back in Lukla. I'm going to stay overnight there and fly out the next morning to Kathmandu. And here's what it looks like to fly out of the world's most dangerous airport. And then it tilts forward quite a bit. It's an odd sensation. So I spent the next 3 days in Kathmandu. My trekking guide took me to 3 or 4 different religious sites. So I'm just going to rifle through some pictures here of some of the more interesting things I saw. We had dinner at this traditional Nepali restaurant, and these 3 gentlemen were playing traditional Nepali music, using traditional Nepali instruments. This stringed instrument, this is like a flute, and of course this is a drum. You know, really entertaining. And then the next day when I was walking around the market area of Kathmandu, I walked by this man's shop and was talking to him about the musical instruments, and I showed him the picture on my phone of the restaurant we were at. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I know those guys. I made their instruments." That was kind of interesting. I can't remember the name of this god, but my guide told me that back in the day, if the community leaders thought that you had done something bad, they would take you in front of this god, walk you in front, and they would ask you questions to see if you would lie. Because the deal was, if you lied, you were going to go to hell. That's just the way what they believed. So I guess, I don't know how true that is, but apparently it was a way to get the truth out of people. Then we visited this area in Kathmandu where they make pottery, and I took a picture of this one shop just because it looked interesting, where you can see the unglazed pots over here, and these are the wood-fired kilns they use. Oh, this is a cool place too. So this is a famous temple. It's on the outskirts of Kathmandu, but it's where, and it's a Hindu temple, it's where they do cremations. So, I think the next slide, and you can see the river there, because after the cremation is done, all the ashes and everything get pushed down into the river. Yeah, so there's one of the, I don't know if you would call it an altar or not, but that's one of the, they had several of these, and that's where the family would be behind here. They'd have a priest officiating this whole cremation, and when things were pretty much done, they'd push it all into the river. Let me go back one. So this temple back here, you have to be a Hindu or a Buddhist to enter that temple. And they have armed army people vetting everybody that goes in there. Even if you're a Westerner that practices Hinduism, you're not getting into that temple. It's just the rule they have. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So another religious site we went to, we visited what they call a living goddess, Kumari. And she travels around, but she was at this place, and we found out we could go up and get a blessing from her. And you know, I'm never one to turn down a blessing, any kind of good wishes. So we went up into this building, and I, you know, knelt down before her, and she blessed me. So the deal with this is, they vet different girls, and the thing is, you can be a Kumari until you reach puberty, and when that happens, your reign or your term is over, and they replace you with another prepubescent girl. So I got blessed. That's what it looked like. My nose. If you forget to put sunscreen on and you climb Island Peak, your nose is going to peel like 3 times. This was another restaurant we went to, a traditional Nepali restaurant, and they had dancers come out about every 10 or 15 minutes, and they would be in a different costume representing one of the ethnic groups in Nepal, which there are many, and the dance, the music would be, you know, particular to that ethnic group. And I'll just play a couple minutes of this, or a couple seconds of it. We got to see, I don't know, 3 or 4 different dances while we were sitting there having dinner. So on my last day in Kathmandu, I met Pradeep's father, Ram, who started the trekking company back in the early 80s. He was doing it before, you know, kind of before it was stylish. And they served me some, again, some traditional Nepali food here. Some rice and vegetables, some chicken, I think some pork, fried potatoes, of course, and fresh grapefruit juice. When I got back to Kathmandu, my guide had to go to the office of the Nepal Mountaineering Association with paperwork and proof that I was actually on the summit of Island Peak. And I got this nice little certificate for my collection. And as I was leaving, my guide gave me these 2 carved rocks with, you know, the particulars of the year and height of the mountain and all that stuff. That was kind of nice. I'll leave this up just for a second. So I had very good things to say about the trekking service. So what happened was, when I set up the itinerary with Pradeep, he went ahead and hired NEMA Sherpa to handle the part, you know, the climbing of Island Peak, just because that's his, you know, that's his thing. And then I would just, this is my last slide. So there's things called Vanny walls and Vanny stones, and what they do, these are prayer mantras that are, like we talked about before, they're carved, and sometimes they're painted with colors. And this was just one, when we took an acclimatization hike, we ran across, this is the only one I've ever seen that was colored, so I just thought I'd end the presentation with that. So I'll take questions, but thank you, you know, for your attention, and thank the club for giving us. I'm going to say maybe there was 50 people. The question was, you know, how many people were at base camp when we got there. I think it was about 50. May is, I was there in May, and late May is when the monsoon starts. So you can still hike and all that, but they get a lot of rain, and there's, you know, trails wash out, and you know, it's probably a better time not to go. You know, like September, October would be better. Yes.
Everybody is able to do this. Kathmandu Ski has certified Everest Base Camp in November. My husband and I went to Bill went in 2018. We went to Kathmandu Ski. When I checked the website today, it's not clear whether it's full, except it still says that if you're looking for a fee, Jane is going to lead that trip. We're doing the trip that she's leading back to back. We're going to meet her at Kathmandu. She finishes at the space camp. We've already done that. She's going to take us on a trek in the Mustang area right now. But anybody who wants to do it, we would really recommend Kathmandu. I think our group was about 8 or 9 people.
Yeah, a lot of the, I was lucky I had a one-on-one with my guide. Oh, I saw groups of anywhere from like maybe 8 to 12 people. That seems to be really common, and it also drives the price down of the service. So that's a good thing too. But there's numerous treks to do in Nepal, and there's still a couple 6,000 meter peaks that I kind of have eyeballed. I've talked to my wife about maybe, excuse me, returning to Nepal maybe this year. I'm not sure, but it's a beautiful place, and you know, there's all kinds of options too. You can walk to Everest Base Camp and take a helicopter back if you want, and guides are pretty flexible. They'll do whatever you want, you know, for money, of course. But there's some people just take a helicopter tour of the area and come back to Kathmandu. There is crazy helicopter traffic. Now, I was there in May, and May is the peak time when people are at Everest, climbing Everest. So it was a pretty busy time of year compared to the fall. But helicopters, sometimes you see 3 helicopters, 2 going one way, 1 going another way. I mean, there's just a lot of helicopters. Yes.
What were the conditions like on Island Peak?
It was cold. I mean, you see there, I had just kind of a light down jacket on with a couple layers underneath. It was maybe 20 degrees, but you're up so high, and when it's sunny, you don't feel it. It's not the same. You know, even when it's like 40 degrees out, you go outside, you're trekking, and it's sunny. You know, 2 layers is what was sufficient for me. And the weather in general was pretty good. We had one rainy day. The day we walked into Namche Bazaar, we both arrived in there pretty wet. It wasn't pouring, but it rained all day. And, you know, the Gore-Tex was wetting through, and it was a little uncomfortable. And then, you know, at night, like, it gets below 0 at night. My room typically would be anywhere from like 35 to 45 degrees. So, you know, you wake up in the morning, you put your down coat on, you put, you know, booties on if you got them. And then with the time difference, they're about 10 hours ahead of us here. So I was able, I had internet a lot of the time, and my Verizon phone even worked there. Sometimes I paid for internet at a tea house like $4 or something for 24 hours. But early in the morning and late in the day, I was able to communicate with friends and family back home, which was really nice. I wasn't offline very much at all. Which is just good because people, you know, back home want to know what you're doing and how you're feeling and all that jazz. Is that you, Jim?
Yeah. So you mentioned how small the summit of Island Peak was. How many people were on the peak when you were up there?
I think there were, when my guide and I got up there were 2 or 3 people. Oh, thank you. There were 2 or 3 people, and they were just on their way out when we left. And then I think another couple of people came up while we were there. And yeah, it's not a good place. Like even that narrow spine coming up, we kind of waited till there wasn't any traffic on that rope before we descended. And you know, at this point, you know, you've been hiking for 9 hours, you're tired, and now you got to descend this thing. And you know, the last thing you want to do is take a misstep or you know, slip. That would be bad. Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the logistics of sending your gear to the guide and making sure that yak takes your gear, not somebody else's gear?
Well, I had a porter. So the porter had my gear. You know, I didn't have a yak, and you know, a good guide service will take care of that for you. They'll make sure your stuff goes to where it's got to go. And they usually put a little security lock or something on the zippers, just so that there's no questions about somebody breaking into your bag or, you know, stealing your stuff. You good? Oh, one more?
Yeah, did you see much evidence of the earthquake?
Yes, I didn't include a lot of those pictures, but in Kathmandu, they're still repairing a lot of the religious sites. There was scaffolding up like all over the place. There was a lot of damage. Yeah, and that's just an earthquake-prone area. I mean, the earth is moving there. So.
Not an actual question, but I just wanted to say thank you for saying all that nice thing about our culture and the country. I'm from Nepal. Moved here in 2008, and it was nice to see someone else who was born and raised in Western culture and their perspective on the country and the culture. So thank you for saying that.
Oh, it was a nice place. I was treated very well by everybody, regardless, you know. I mean, I was harassed a little bit in the market Tamale area. You know, and I said to my guide, you know, I go, is it possible I stick out? You know, you see, Nepalis are not very big people, you know.
They're very tiny like me.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was a target a little bit, but it was fine. It was all, yeah, it was all enjoyable. I didn't have any bad experiences at all there. I'd go back again.
Any more questions? Okay, how about a nice hand for